We live in very holy times. Thankfully, we live in a time where we have the privilege, the schus, the honor of living in a time period where we have most of Yerushalayim back today. We get to visit the Kotel. Unfortunately, we have not yet seen Yerushalayim Habnuyah, but God willing, it's only a couple of minutes away. I wanted to share with you, in this time period of Yom Yerushalayim, just a couple of quick thoughts about the sanctity of Yerushalayim Yireh. How did Yerushalayim get its name? The Medrash tells us that it's actually a hybrid name. Two different people named Yerushalayim. Avram named it Yireh, God will see, and Shem named it Shalem, completion, perfection. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Medrash tells us, could not decide neither Yireh nor Shalem, because if he would name it Yireh after Avram Avinu, then Shem would be upset. How come you didn't use my name? And if he would name it Shalem after Shem's name, then Avram would be upset. How come you didn't name it my name, Yireh? This Medrash is obviously quite puzzling. What is the Medrash telling us? First of all people, why Avram and Shem? Why were they the ones that named Yerushalayim? And second of all, Avram and Shem were not petty people. Right? If the name was Shalem, I imagine that Avram Avinu would have said, okay, that's the will of God. So why do I care if he named it after somebody else? And I'm sure Shem would have said the same exact thing. Shem was, of course, a tremendous tzaddik. So what is this petty disagreement that seems to be going on in the Medrash? And of course, above all, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu feel the need to make some sort of pshara, to say it's neither Yireh nor Shalem, but we're going to name it Yerushalayim? As if HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares if Avram Avinu or Shem gets upset. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is kulo emes, he's total truth. And of course, God will give the name that is the rightful name of Yerushalayim. So what is this hybrid? In order to understand this, we need to understand who Shem was. Shem had the first yeshiva. In fact, Avram Avinu learned in the yeshiva of Shem. Shem was Avram Avinu's Rebbe. We know that Shem's yeshiva can be found throughout the generations of Klal Yisrael. Avram Avinu learned in that yeshiva. Rivka went to the yeshiva to ask Shem what was going on when she had these two competing ideologies in her womb. And Yaakov Avinu, we know, learned for many, many years in Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever, both in the beginning of his life and later when he was running away from Esav. So Shem is the Rebbe, so to speak, of Klal Yisrael. What's Avram Avinu's relationship to Shem? Avram is the Talmud. And yet we find that Avram and Shem seem to have different worldviews. Shem's worldview is, I'll create a yeshiva. People can come to my yeshiva, they can learn about God, and Shem was in fact a tzaddik who knew about God, but Shem is not Jewish. Shem is not someone who fulfills the mission that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world for. Why not? Why wasn't it Shem? Shem's ideology was, I'm here to teach, and if you want to learn, you're welcome to come. But Avram's ideology was, I want to go out into the world and I want to teach the world about God. And that's what the Rambam says in Hilchas Avodah Zarah, that Avram Avinu would go from city to city and he would teach people about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Meiri in Pirkei Avos says that Avram Avinu was makarev half of the known world to the idea of monotheism, to the idea of the oneness of God. So the difference between Avram Avinu and Shem was not in their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was in their relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mission. Shem, he felt he was the teacher. If you want to learn, he was open and available to all. But Avram Avinu went out into the world to conquer the world, to teach the world about the oneness of God. And we find that this competing ideology expresses itself in Yerushalayim Yireh. For Avram Avinu, it's about vision. It's about what's going on outside. It's what God will see. We know that Chazal tell us that ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgives Klal Yisrael because the schus of Avram Avinu by the Akedah, where he took up to the mountain of Yerushalayim, to Har Abayis, to the Temple Mount, Avram Avinu took his own son and was ready to sacrifice him for God. Yireh, God, you will see what happened on this mountain, and one day that will be an atonement for your children. This is classic Avram Avinu, looking outside of himself, taking care of everything else. Shem, of course, was Shalem, completion, perfection, the avoda of the internal, and that's equally true in Judaism. There is an avoda where a person has to take care of themselves, self-growth, self-love, self-care. Learning is an unbelievable thing, and Shem expresses that attribute. But when it comes to the naming of Yerushalayim Yireh HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us both are true. There is an avoda of a Jew to be internal, to work on himself, and in rectifying himself, he certainly rectifies the outside world, as the Ramchal in Derech Hashem explains at length. But there is also an avoda of not being selfish, of going out and seeing what our brothers and our sisters and what the world needs from us. As the pasuk says, Ki sifsei kohen yishmeru das, we are kol mamlechas kohanim v'goy kadosh. We are a priestly nation, and the priests are the teachers. We are the shomrei das. We are the keepers of knowledge. But we have an achrayus. We have a responsibility to go out and to teach the world, to impact the world, to share the Jewish mission with the world, the oneness of God, and in that way to bring peace and unity to the entire world, to spread love and light. Avram Avinu, he was the Talmud of Shem, and yet he was going to fight for his ideology. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have said, the name is Shalem, Avram Avinu would have said, Rebbe, I appreciate your ideology, but I'm going to fight that we take our ideology out into the world. And Shem also said the same thing. Avram Avinu, I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate the vision of going out, but be careful. There always has to be a yeshiva. There always has to be a place that you come back to. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says both are true. But interestingly, Avram Avinu's name comes first. It's Yerushalayim, the Yireh, the vision. It comes first because in Yahadus, our shlemus, our completion, only comes when we're willing to share our message with another. And this is the gift of Yerushalayim that we have today. It is amazing, it is incredible that President Trump has moved the embassy to Jerusalem. What a wonderful thing. And we see all of these things are just moments that are bringing us closer and closer to Mashiach, and that's an incredible thing. And the fact that so many Jews can come to visit the Kotel and those that live here have the opportunity to do so all the time, it is incredible. But we have to ask ourselves, now that we are on the verge of Mashiach coming, and we have Yerushalayim, Yireh Kodesh, what message are we sending to the world? What are we saying? Are we keeping it to ourselves, or are we bringing it out? And if we are bringing it out, what are we saying? Are we giving a message over that's uniquely Jewish? Do we have the pride and the courage to share with the world something that is uniquely Jewish? Namely, there is only one God, and that unites us all in the most incredible way. Are we sharing a message of peace? Are we sharing a message of love? Are we sharing a message of togetherness? Or are we apologetic for our values? Do we cower and say, well, maybe they have it right? Or do we have the strength to say, we have a gift, and we're here to share that gift with the world? It is my sincere prayer, my hope to all of us, not just to those that are listening, but to those that are not, that as we enter into these final moments before Mashiach comes, that we have the opportunity to use Yerushalayim Yireh Kodesh, to share the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given to us, Am Yisrael, with the rest of the world. Let that be a message of peace, love, and hope.